It was a routine flight from Chicago to New York, another Tuesday morning shuttle in the sky. But when a decorated airline captain looked down his manifest and saw the name of a 17-year-old girl, he made a decision that would ignite a firestorm. He refused to fly, citing a vague security risk that everyone knew was a lie. He publicly humiliated the black teenager, ordering her off his plane. He thought he was untouchable, a king in his cockpit. He didn't know that this quiet, observant girl held the power to bring his kingdom crashing down. In less than 10 minutes, with a single, calm phone call, she wouldn't just get him fired, she would ground his entire airline. Captain Alistair McGregor liked order. He liked the crisp, satisfying snap of a checklist binder closing, the low, predictable hum of the Airbus A320's avionics coming to life, the neat lines of passengers filing into the cabin, their faces a blur of anonymity. For 34 years, this metal tube had been his sanctuary, a self-contained kingdom where his word was absolute law. At 58, his hair was the color of distinguished pewter, his jaw was perpetually set in a mask of stern competence, and his eyes, the color of a faded summer sky, missed nothing. He was Aurajet's star pilot, a man featured in their in-flight magazine, a veteran who had weathered storms, engine failures, and the turbulent tides of the airline industry itself. He was, in his own mind, inviolable. The flight today was Aurajet 818, a bread-and-butter run from Chicago O'Hare to New York's LaGuardia. A full flight, business as usual. As First Officer David Chen, a capable and deferential man half McGregor's age, ran through the pre-flight checks, Alistair scanned the passenger manifest. His eyes traced the names, a familiar rhythm of Smiths, Kims, and Garcias. Then his gaze snagged. Seat 14B, Williams, Zora, age 17. Alistair's jaw tightened. 17, an unaccompanied minor technically, though airlines had different rules for that age. His eyes flickered up, peering through the small cockpit window at the jet bridge. He saw her then. She was standing patiently in the queue for Zone 3, a slim girl with her hair in intricate braids, a book clutched in one hand and a worn backpack slung over her shoulder. She was dressed in simple jeans and a university sweatshirt, her face a portrait of calm intelligence. And she was black. Something cold and ugly coiled in Alistair McGregor's gut. It was a prejudice he'd nurtured in the quiet, bitter corners of his mind for years, a worldview soured by a failed business venture with a black partner decades ago, an event he'd reframed in his memory as a grand betrayal rather than the result of his own reckless decisions. He saw not a teenage girl going to visit family or starting a new chapter in her life. He saw a threat, a disruption to his orderly world. His mind, a master of self-deception, began to build a case. She looked furtive, the way she scanned the crowd, the way she held her backpack. These were not the thoughts of a rational man, but of a bigot searching for justification. "David," he said, his voice a low rumble that cut through the cockpit's hum, "take a look at the passenger in the red sweatshirt in Zone 3. David Chen leaned forward, squinting. He saw a young woman. "The kid with the book? What about her?" "I have a bad feeling," Alistair said, the words carefully chosen. He was an expert at cloaking his poison in the language of professional caution. "I don't like her demeanor. I'm flagging her as a potential security concern." David stared at him, baffled. "Captain, with all due respect, she's a 17-year-old girl. She looks like she's on her way to college." "And Timothy McVeigh looked like a soldier," Alistair retorted, the false equivalency delivered with chilling gravity. "Age is irrelevant. I have a command responsibility to ensure the safety of this flight. My gut tells me something is off. I'm not comfortable with her on my plane." The finality in his tone was absolute. David knew this side of McGregor. He had seen it before, in curt dismissals of female flight attendants, in snide remarks about non-native English-speaking ground crew, but never this, never something so blatant, so baseless. To challenge him now would be to commit career suicide. David, with a young family and a mortgage, fell silent, his face a mask of discomfort. Alistair unbuckled his belt. "I'll handle it." He strode out of the cockpit and spoke to the lead flight attendant, a seasoned professional named Maria Flores. "Maria, the passenger in seat 14B, Zora Williams. I need her removed from the flight." Maria blinked, her practiced customer service smile faltering. "Removed, Captain? Is there a problem with her ticket?" "There's a problem with my comfort level," Alistair said, his voice low and imperious. "She presents a security risk. I want her and her baggage off this plane, now." He didn't wait for a response, turning on his heel and returning to his cockpit kingdom, the door sealing shut behind him with a pneumatic hiss. He had planted the seed. Now he would watch it grow from the sterile safety of his throne.
With a heavy heart and a deep sense of wrongness, she approached the gate agent. The boarding process continued, and soon Zora Williams stepped onto the plane. She smiled politely to Maria, her eyes bright and curious. She found her seat, 14B, a middle seat between a portly businessman already typing furiously on his laptop and a young mother trying to soothe a restless toddler. Zora slid in gracefully, stowed her backpack under the seat in front of her, and opened her book, a collection of essays by James Baldwin. She had just settled in when Maria Flores appeared in the aisle, her face pale. Beside her stood a burly Orajet ground supervisor. "Miss Williams," Maria said, her voice strained. Zora looked up, her bookmarking finger marking her page. "Yes?" "I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you to come with me," Maria said, avoiding her eyes. The businessman in 14A huffed with annoyance as Zora shuffled to get out. The mother in 14C pulled her toddler closer. Heads began to turn. The low murmur of the cabin chatter began to shift, to curdle with suspicion. "Is something wrong?" Zora asked, her voice steady, though a knot of confusion and anxiety was tightening in her stomach. "The captain has made a decision," the ground supervisor said, his tone impersonal and gruff. "Please collect your belongings and deplane." "The captain," Zora repeated, her brow furrowing. "But why? Did I do something?" "The captain reserves the right to refuse boarding to any passenger deemed a security risk," the supervisor intoned, the words sounding like a memorized script. The phrase hung in the recycled air, security risk. Zora felt a hot flush of humiliation creep up her neck. Every eye in the cabin was on her. She saw the suspicion, the fear, the morbid curiosity on the faces of her fellow passengers. They didn't see a girl with a book, they saw a threat, just as the unseen captain had decreed. Her luggage wasn't just a backpack, it was now a suspicious package. Her calm demeanor wasn't placidity, it was cunning. In a matter of seconds, she had been tried and convicted by the silent, absolute monarch in the cockpit. She said nothing. Arguing would only amplify the scene. Protesting her innocence would only make her look guilty to these strangers. With a quiet dignity that belied her years, she pulled her backpack from under the seat, murmured an apology to the man she had to squeeze past again, and walked down the aisle, her back straight, her gaze fixed on the open door of the aircraft. As she stepped onto the jet bridge, the ground supervisor gestured for her to wait, speaking into his walkie-talkie to have her checked bag, if she had one, located and removed from the cargo hold. Zora stood there, the sounds of the bustling airport a distant hum. The humiliation was a physical thing, a burning sensation behind her eyes. But beneath it, a different feeling was taking root. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was a cold, sharp clarity. She had been singled out. She knew why. It was the oldest, ugliest story in the book, a story the essays in her hand chronicled with painful eloquence. She watched as the jet bridge operator prepared to pull back from the aircraft. The door to Orajet 818 was sealed. Inside, Alistair McGregor would be feeling a sense of satisfaction. The disruption had been removed. His orderly kingdom was secure. Zora reached into her pocket, pulled out her phone, and scrolled through her contacts. She found the name she was looking for, Mom. She pressed the call button, her expression hardening from one of victimhood to one of resolve. McGregor thought he had removed a problem. He had no idea he had just armed a missile. The call Zora was making wasn't to a hysterical parent. It was a call to a woman who could move mountains with a phone call. A woman who didn't just understand the rules of the game, she had written them. The king in the cockpit was about to learn what happened when you unjustly ejected royalty from your kingdom. Evelyn Reed was in the middle of dismantling a hostile takeover bid for a multi-billion-dollar aerospace firm. Her corner office on the 54th story of a gleaming skyscraper in downtown Manhattan offered a panoramic view of the city, but she wasn't looking at it. Her focus was lasered in on the stack of documents before her, her mind a whirlwind of contractual obligations, SEC regulations, and shareholder leverage. At 48, Evelyn was a force of nature disguised as a corporate attorney. Her name was spoken with a mixture of fear and reverence in the boardrooms of the world's largest aviation companies. She was the lead counsel for the prestigious Orion Group, a massive investment consortium with significant, often controlling stakes in everything from aircraft manufacturers to regional airlines. She was known for her photographic memory, her surgical precision in litigation, and a demeanor so calm and collected it was unnerving. When her private line buzzed, she glanced at the caller ID, Zora. Her expression instantly softened. She answered on the first ring, her voice losing its boardroom edge. "Hey, sweetie, you should be in the air by now. Everything okay?" "I'm fine, Mom, but there's been an issue with the flight." Zora's voice was unnaturally steady. It was this steadiness that immediately set off alarms in Evelyn's head. Hysteria she could handle, tears she could soothe, but this cold, controlled calm, this was the voice of someone who had been deeply wronged and was processing it with chilling maturity. "What kind of issue?" Evelyn asked, already pushing the aerospace documents aside, her full attention now on her daughter's words. "I was removed from the plane," Zora said, each word delivered with precision. "Orajet 818 from O'Hare to LaGuardia. I was seated, and a flight attendant and a ground supervisor asked me to deplane."
Evelyn's blood ran cold. On what grounds? They said the captain deemed me a security risk. The silence that followed was heavy. In that single phrase, Evelyn understood everything. The vagueness, the public nature of the removal, the fact that her brilliant, gentle daughter, who volunteered at animal shelters and was editor of her school's literary magazine, could be labeled such a thing. She didn't need to ask for a description of the captain. She didn't need to ask if anyone else had been removed. She knew. "Zora, are you in a safe place right now?" Evelyn asked, her voice a tightrope walk between maternal concern and professional assessment. "I'm on the jet bridge. They're pulling it back from the plane. They had to find my checked bag, so it took a few minutes. I can see the cockpit. There's a man in the pilot's seat, older, white hair. He's watching me." Evelyn's eyes narrowed. She swiveled in her chair, her gaze finally falling on the city below. Though she wasn't seeing the view, she was seeing a chessboard. "Okay, Zora, listen to me very carefully. I want you to go to the nearest Orajet customer service desk. Tell them you need to be rebooked, but do not, I repeat, do not mention what happened. Just say you missed the flight. Be polite, be forgettable. Then go to the Admiral's Club Lounge. Your pass is on your phone. Find a quiet corner and wait for my call. Do you understand?" "Yes, Mom. I love you. I'm going to handle this." "I know," Zora said, and for the first time a slight tremor entered her voice. "I'm sorry to bother you at work." "Never, ever apologize for calling me," Evelyn said with fierce tenderness. "Ever. I'll call you back soon." She hung up. For a full 10 seconds she sat motionless, the fury building within her like a contained nuclear reaction. It was a cold, white-hot rage, not the kind that resulted in shouting, but the kind that resulted in the complete and utter dismantling of one's enemies. She turned to her computer. Her fingers, tipped with immaculate French manicured nails, flew across the keyboard. Aurajet, a mid-sized carrier known for its aggressive cost-cutting, and a CEO, Richard Sterling, who was perpetually trying to punch above his weight class. The Orion Group didn't have a direct stake in Aurajet, which made them, in Evelyn's mind, vulnerable. But Orion did have a majority stake in Air Global, the company that leased Aurajet 70% of its Airbus fleet. Orion also controlled the primary insurance underwriter of Aurajet's entire operation. Evelyn knew where every single pressure point was. She picked up her phone again. Her first call was not to the CEO of the airline. That was a rookie move. You don't call the person who can give you an apology. You call the person who can give you an amputation. Her first call was a man named Marcus Torn, the head of global operations for Air Global. "Marcus, Evelyn Reed." "Evelyn, to what do I owe the pleasure?" Marcus's voice was jovial. He knew Evelyn well. She never called for pleasure. "I have an urgent and non-negotiable directive," Evelyn said, her tone devoid of any pleasantries. "I need you to issue an immediate recall notice for all Aurajet assets leased through your company, effective immediately. Cite emergency safety inspections of the fuselage locking mechanisms across the entire fleet." There was a stunned silence on the other end. "Evelyn, what the hell are you talking about? A fleet-wide recall that would ground their entire operation? That's hundreds of millions in losses per day. Their stock would be worthless by noon. Richard Sterling would have a heart attack." "That is not my concern," Evelyn stated, her voice like ice. "The official reason is a potential safety flaw our internal auditors are flagging. It's credible enough to stand. The real reason is that one of their pilots just endangered the child of a person who controls your parent company. This is not a negotiation, Marcus. This is a directive from your board's largest representative. Do it now. Send me the confirmation when it's done." She hung up before he could argue further. He wouldn't. He knew her reputation. He knew she had the power to make that call, and the board would back her without question. Her second call was to Eleanor Vance, a different Vance from the restriction, the head underwriter at Pantheon Risk Management, Aurajet's insurer. The conversation was even shorter. "Eleanor, it's Evelyn Reed. I'm invoking Section 7, subparagraph B of the Aurajet policy, the clause regarding unforeseen operational risks posed by personnel. A material risk has been exposed that was not disclosed." "Suspended?" Eleanor gasped. "Evelyn, no airline can operate for a minute without coverage. The FAA would ground them instantly." "Precisely," Evelyn said. "Consider them suspended as of 10 minutes ago. Issue the notices. I'll back you with a full legal indemnity from Orion." She hung up. On board Aurajet 818, Captain Alistair McGregor was feeling smug. He watched the girl retreat down the jet bridge. He'd done the right thing. He'd protected his flight. He gave the thumbs up to the ground crew. The engines began to spool up with a satisfying whine. "All clear for pushback," David Chen said, his voice still tight with unease. "Excellent," Alistair replied, leaning back in his seat. Just then, a frantic voice crackled over the radio from the control tower. "Aurajet 818, hold your position. Do not push back. I repeat, hold your position." McGregor grabbed his radio. "Tower, this is Aurajet 818. We are ready for departure. What's the holdup?" "Aurajet 818, we have a ground stop on all Aurajet traffic nationwide. No Aurajet flight is cleared for takeoff or landing at this time." "All airborne flights are being diverted. I don't have any more information. Just hold your position." David Chen stared at McGregor, his eyes wide. "A nationwide ground stop for us? What could cause that? A terror threat?" McGregor was baffled. His mind raced. Was it related to the girl? No, impossible. It had to be a coincidence, a massive fleet-wide technical failure, or a security breach in the company's systems. It couldn't possibly have anything to do with a 17-year-old passenger. But as the minutes ticked by and his phone began buzzing with frantic messages from other Aurajet pilots grounded in Dallas, Miami, and Los Angeles, a tiny cold seed of doubt began to sprout in the barren ground of his certainty. He had kicked a girl off a plane, and 10 minutes later, the entire airline had been brought to its knees. The cascade had begun, and the king in his cockpit was about to be drowned by the flood. The chaos at O'Hare was a microcosm of the pandemonium erupting in every major airport across the United States. Within 15 minutes of Evelyn Reed's phone calls, the intricate, delicate ballet of air travel had shattered for one airline. On the massive departure boards, every flight listed under the crisp blue Aurajet logo blinked from on time to a stark, ominous red, canceled. Gate agents, who moments before had been placidly scanning boarding passes, were now facing a rising tide of fury. Passengers stranded mid-journey or at the start of their vacations and business trips swarmed the customer service counters, their voices a cacophony of confusion and outrage. "What do you mean canceled? A nationwide ground stop? Why? I have a connecting flight in Dallas." In the Aurajet corporate headquarters in Atlanta, CEO Richard Sterling was in a state of apoplectic disbelief. He was a man whose entire personality was built on bluster and forward momentum. A ground stop was the corporate equivalent of a full cardiac arrest. "What in God's name is happening?" he bellowed into his speakerphone, his face turning a blotchy crimson. He was addressing his entire senior leadership team, all of whom looked as shell-shocked as he did. "We're getting conflicting reports, Richard," said the COO. "The FAA isn't telling us anything directly, just that the order stands. But our people at Air Global just forwarded a mandatory recall notice on our entire Airbus fleet. They're citing fuselage lock inspections. It makes no sense. There's no such issue." "And I just got off the phone with Pantheon," the chief financial officer chimed in, his voice trembling. "They've suspended our insurance coverage. They cited a personnel risk clause. They wouldn't elaborate. Richard, we can't legally operate without insurance. We are, for all intents and purposes, defunct until that's resolved." Sterling slammed his fist on his mahogany desk. "A lease recall and an insurance suspension within minutes of each other? This isn't a coincidence. This is a coordinated attack. Who did we piss off? The union? A competitor?" No one had an answer. The machine had been stopped, but they couldn't see the hand that had pulled the lever. Back at O'Hare, Captain Alistair McGregor was still sitting in the cockpit of the now inert Flight 818. The passengers had been deplaned, adding to the bedlam in the terminal. He and David Chen were waiting for instructions, surrounded by an unnerving silence. The smug satisfaction Alistair had felt was long gone, replaced by a growing dread that felt like ice water seeping into his bones. A sharp rap on the cockpit door made both men jump. It was John Carmichael, Aurajet's chief of operations for the O'Hare hub, and his face was grim. "Alistair, I need a word in the jet bridge." McGregor unbuckled himself, a sense of foreboding settling over him. He followed Carmichael out of the cockpit, leaving David Chen alone with the silent instruments. "What's going on, John?" Alistair asked, trying to keep his tone casual, authoritative. "Is this some kind of system-wide IT failure?" Carmichael didn't answer right away. He just stared at Alistair, his expression a mixture of anger and disbelief. "I just got off the phone with corporate. They're trying to figure out what lit the fuse. They asked me for a full report of any and all operational irregularities at O'Hare in the last hour. Anything at all out of the ordinary." He paused, his gaze hardening. "So I told them. I told them my most senior captain grounded a flight because he refused to fly with a 17-year-old girl." Alistair's face went pale. "I didn't ground the flight. I removed a passenger I deemed a security threat. That's my prerogative as pilot in command." "A security threat," shot back Carmichael, his voice a low hiss.
Don't you dare feed me that line of crap. I pulled her file. Zora Williams, honor roll student, on her way to a youth leadership conference in New York. The only thing threatening about her is that you happen to be a prejudiced old fool. Maria Flores on your crew already gave a preliminary statement. She said the girl was polite and calm. So you tell me, what was the real threat? My gut feeling is a valid reason. Your gut feeling just brought this entire company to a screeching halt. Carmichael's voice rose, echoing in the metal tube of the jet bridge. We've been doing some digging, trying to find the source of the financial attack, and a name popped up. Evelyn Reed. Alistair stared blankly. Who's Evelyn Reed? Oh, she's just the lead counsel for the Orion Group, Carmichael said with biting sarcasm, the investment firm that happens to be the majority shareholder of both Airless Global, which owns your plane, and Pantheon Risk Management, which holds our insurance. She is, for all intents and purposes, a woman who can decide whether we fly or we die.
And Richard Sterling's assistant finally got a message back from her office, a very short message. Carmichael held up his phone, the screen displaying a single sentence. He read it aloud with the grim finality of a judge delivering a verdict. The matter concerns the unprofessional and discriminatory treatment of my daughter, Zora Williams, by one of your pilots. All operational holds will remain in effect pending a satisfactory resolution. The world seemed to tilt under Alistair McGregor's feet. The name Zora Williams, the quiet girl with the book. Her mother was Evelyn Reed. He hadn't just kicked a passenger off his plane, he had publicly humiliated the daughter of one of the most powerful figures in the global aviation industry. The security risk he had invented out of pure bigotry had turned into a catastrophic reality-bending threat. Not from the girl herself, but from the immense invisible power standing right behind her. He felt a sudden dizzying wave of nausea. His entire career, his carefully constructed kingdom, his sense of untouchable authority, it was all evaporating in the face of this single, colossal miscalculation. He had been the king, and she had been a mere pawn, but he had failed to see that the pawn was protected by the queen, a queen who could sweep the entire board clean with a single move. "My God," Alistair whispered, leaning against the wall of the jet bridge, the confident swagger gone, replaced by the frail posture of a broken man. "What have I done?" In the Admiral's Club lounge, Zora sat in a plush armchair nursing a glass of water. She'd done as her mother asked. She had been polite, quiet, and forgettable. Around her, she could hear the agitated murmurs of other Aurajet passengers, their phones pressed to their ears as they tried to rebook on other airlines, their voices laced with panic about the stock market, about the airline collapsing. They had no idea the epicenter of this entire earthquake was the calm teenage girl sitting in the corner reading her book. Her phone vibrated. It was her mom. "Hey," Zora answered, her voice soft. "It's being handled, sweetie," Evelyn's voice came through, calm and reassuring as ever. "There's a car waiting for you downstairs at baggage claim 3. It will take you to a hotel we've booked for you. I'm on the next flight to Chicago. I'll be there by dinner." Zora looked out the vast window of the lounge at the airfield below. She saw the fleet of Aurajet planes sitting motionless and silent on the tarmac, like giant sleeping birds. They were grounded, all of them, because of her, because her mother loved her. The thought was overwhelming, a strange and terrifying mix of vindication and awe. She hadn't asked for this. She had just wanted to go to New York. But Captain McGregor, in his blind arrogance, had started a war. He just didn't realize he had brought a knife to a nuclear fight, and the first bomb had already gone off, vaporizing the airline he had sworn to serve. The grounding of Aurajet was no longer just an industry crisis. It was a lead story on the national news. Financial news networks ran frantic segments with analysts speculating on the airline's imminent bankruptcy, while cable news channels began to frame the story in terms of corporate malfeasance and increasingly civil rights.
The name Zora Williams, initially just a footnote in the corporate drama, was now at the center of a media firestorm. Evelyn Reed, fiercely protective of her daughter's privacy, refused all comment, which only fueled the speculation. Her silence was more powerful than any press release. It was the silence of someone holding all the cards, waiting for her opponent to fold. For Orajet, folding was not an option. They were already in a state of free fall. The resolution Evelyn demanded was not going to be a simple apology and a settlement check. She had made it clear through back channels. She wanted a full, transparent, and uncompromising investigation into the incident and the culture that allowed it to happen. She wanted Alistair McGregor's wings, metaphorically and literally, and she wanted Orajet to conduct a painful and public self-examination. The airline had no choice but to comply. They hired an independent counsel, a former federal prosecutor named Julian Croft, to lead the internal investigation. Croft's mandate was clear: find the truth, no matter how ugly, and report it. The survival of the 12,000-employee airline depended on it. The investigation began with Captain Alistair McGregor. He was suspended without pay and summoned to a sterile conference room at Orajet's O'Hare offices. Gone was the crisp, authoritative uniform. He wore a rumpled gray suit, his face gaunt, the cocksure arrogance replaced by a haunted, defensive glare. Across the table sat Julian Croft and a team of lawyers. Captain McGregor, Croft began, his voice neutral. We are here to understand the basis for your decision to remove Miss Zora Williams from Flight 818. Please walk me through your threat assessment specifically. Alistair cleared his throat. It was an assessment based on 34 years of experience. Her demeanor was unsettling. She avoided eye contact. She seemed nervous, agitated. Unsettling how? Croft pressed. Did she say something? Make a threatening gesture? Was there a credible tip from law enforcement? No, it was a feeling, a gut instinct. As pilot in command, my judgment regarding the safety of the flight is absolute. Alistair clung to the regulations like a life raft. We've reviewed the CCTV footage from the gate area, Captain, Croft said, sliding a tablet across the table. This is Miss Williams waiting in line. She appears to be reading a book. She looks up occasionally, as people in queues do. Is this the agitated demeanor you're referring to? Alistair looked at the screen. He saw the girl he had condemned. She looked studious and patient. There was nothing to support his claim. The camera doesn't show everything, the feeling, the intuition.